Welcome back to Get Down to Business, and I am thrilled to kick off our conversation with a talent strategy expert who has spent more than 25 years advising Fortune 100 leaders, private equity-backed firms, and privately held businesses on how to build elite teams. I'm joined by Penna, who is the founder of ASOP Partners, LLC, and the creator of the Hire Best System, an executive assessment framework that boasts an incredible 90% success rate in identifying top-tier talent. He's the author of the new book, Cypher, a proven framework to hire the best people. Craig is here to expose why traditional job descriptions fail, how to remove costly subjectivity from your recruiting process, and how creating an internal Cypher can completely bulletproof your organizational growth. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
Absolutely. 25 years advising Fortune 100 and private equity-backed firms on executive talent. So we know that data shows that nearly half of new hires fail within 18 months and can cost an organization up to 15 times that candidate's salary. Why do highly sophisticated CEOs continue to treat these massive financial losses at just a cost of doing business?
What a great question. A, because they don't believe they can change it, and B, because the costs don't actually show up as identifiable as many of their other costs. So there's a lot of beliefs that, just hiring poorly is a cost of doing business, and you're not going to make a successful hire in every one. But as you correctly know, the amount of people that don't work out, 50% won't last 18 months. Unfortunately, the bulk of the 50% who do last more than 18 months, they're not going to work out either. They're just going to stay in the role, though. So you're faced with a meh level of talent in the company. Only 18% of people who are ultimately hired are ultimately successful after those 18 months. So it's a hard challenge.
Wow. And your book, Cypher, argues that the most critical hiring mistakes are actually happening long before an interview is taking place. Why is that pre-interview phase such a blind spot for leadership teams? What are they getting wrong at that starting line?
They're rushing to interview. They're not thinking about what they really need in the role. And if they are, they're doing it independently. So if there's 5 people on the hiring team and you ask all 5 of them, what do we need in this role? Chances are you're going to get 5 or more different responses to that question of what are we really looking for. As a result, we're all going into the process a bit blind, judging people by our own criteria, not a shared understanding of what's required for success in the role, and ultimately working at cross purposes with one another. But when you actually take the time to create that cipher or that framework of what does success look like in this role, and then you align on it, you can waste a lot less time with candidates who are never going to proceed in the role, and instead just focus on those who have clearly demonstrated the ability to succeed in things that you're looking for.
So let's break it down a little bit more. For our listeners who are unfamiliar with your framework, which they won't be for long because we're going to make sure our listeners can find your book and get in touch with you. But if they are currently unfamiliar, what exactly is a job cipher? And how does it differ from the standard job descriptions that we see posted on job boards every day?
So a job description is a great document to recruit people and give someone a sense of hiring, but it has no discernible decision-making ability. That's where the cipher comes in. The cipher is a much more succinct document that lays out in prioritized fashion what is success in this role, what does that look like, and what is it going to take for someone to succeed and accomplish that success. And quite simply, this cipher can best be remembered by remembering the code. The code is the way to unlock great hiring. And that's an acronym for 4 key words. We have our charge, our outcome, our deliverables, and efforts. The charge is one sentence that in layman's terms explains what is this role all about. The outcome is a very specific measurement of success. This person will achieve this success if they're overall successful in the role. So they'll drive revenue, or they'll achieve X new listeners, or whatever the goal is here. The deliverables are the 5 to 7 specific accomplishments, achievements, deliverables that we expect that person to do in order to achieve that outcome. And then the efforts are the 3, 4, 5 sub-bullet points underneath each deliverable that explains how someone needs to achieve that deliverable. And it gives great clarity on what that person has to do to succeed. Therefore, it's great to hire based off of that cipher.
Craig, hiring managers love to say, I'll know the right person when I see them. And they rely so heavily on personal chemistry or instinct. Why is that mindset so dangerous, especially when an owner is under intense pressure to fill an open seat?
Because you're going to get more people just like you. And if you're saying, hey, I just want someone just like me, because exactly you said it in the question, when I know it, I know the right person when I see them. That often turns into, yeah, someone who kind of looks like me, someone who I think will be good. But you're not thinking about what they have to do. You're going to make a decision based off of how much you like them. And look, I like to like the people I'm around. That's important. And there is likability has to work out. There's a lot of people who don't work out in a job because of culture reasons. And I put that in air quotes because that's also poorly defined. But when you start looking for the right person based off of when I see them, you're going to get biased by some of the interpersonal stories they tell. And you're going to forget to ask about, can they actually do the job? And instead start to reshape the job based around this person you've just met. And that might not be what your company needs.
And that's a perfect segue because we know subconscious bias is a major talking point in modern corporate culture. But you argue that bias isn't solved by good intentions or corporate training, but by a better structure. You were just explaining that.
Yeah.
What does an unbiased, structured interview process look like in practice?
Yeah. So first of all, I accept bias as a truism in life. We are rife with biases all throughout every day. The key is to manage your biases. The first step in managing your biases is to understand which ones you might be affected by and then make efforts not to be affected by that. The number one way to do that is through data. So you want a hiring process that focuses on data rather than gut feel. The first step in that process is having the same set of questions that you're going to ask of every candidate, regardless of who that person is. Right? And if I know that I'm asking every candidate the same questions, then any variation in results is coming from that candidate, not from me and my feeling of that person and the questions I decide to ask today versus the different ones I asked last week to someone else.
So your framework, it applies to everything from corporate boardrooms to star athletes. Once the perfect candidate is onboarded, how does the job cipher evolve into a long-term tool for performance management and accountability?
So if you think about the last time you were onboarded into a company, there was probably a lot of training around HR policies. They showed you where the bathroom was, where the cafeteria might be. Perhaps they went over some of the software. But it's rare that anyone ever told you what it is you actually need to do. The cipher, once you wipe out the grades that you might have taken during the interview process, now presents back to that candidate who's now an employee, a team member. Hey, this is a criteria we use to judge whether or not you could do the role, because ultimately, this is the role that has to be done. So now I want to sit down with you and talk about what are the specific goals we need to set relative to this cipher that you're going to accomplish in the first 30, 60, 90 days. And it becomes a great tool to talk about the role in very objective terms and to create a plan around how that person can achieve it. When you've started off your relationship with the person like that, you're now able to come back to the cipher every quarter and say, hey, let's take a look at it. How well are you doing on deliverable 3, on deliverable 4? What are your challenges? How can I help you through those? And how do we make sure that you're achieving that outcome that we banked on you being able to do after a couple of years?
And I know it impacts culture, obviously real outcomes, including profitability, which is awesome. Again, I've been chatting with Craig della Penna, who is the founder of ASOP Partners, LLC, the creator of the Hire Best system, a really amazing executive assessment framework that boasts an incredible 90% success rate in identifying top-tier talent. And he's the author of the new book, Cipher, a proven framework to hire the best people. Who wouldn't want to do that? Craig, I want to give the final word over to you. What can folks expect in the book, and why should they get in touch with you, and how can they get in touch with you and find that book?
So what they can expect in the book is a very practical advice with a lot of heart and life into it. I've sprinkled in a lot of real world stories around the hiring happiness and mishaps across my career. You can find the book, of course, at that little website Jeff Bezos created a few years back called Amazon. You can also find me at either of my company websites, aesoppartners.com, that's AESOP partners.com, or hirebest.ai.
Fantastic. Craig, thank you so much for giving us so much valuable advice and information. Can't wait to bring you back onto the program again real soon. You're listening to Get Down to Business. We're going to squeeze a quick break over here. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.